Previously, in the sample answer that I showed you for question 5 about should homework be history, I spoke about how I use a lot of metaphors in the answer to kind of create a lot of impact. And then I gave some more examples after that of professional writers who use a lot of metaphors to do the same thing to create a lot of impact in their writing. So we're going to look at metaphors briefly today. And what I'll do is I'll just remind you of the article from the Formula One magazine. So it says, Formula One is a gladiatorial contest between drivers, a political dogfight between team bosses, but the true nature of the beast is tireless pursuit of engineering excellence. Mostly, therefore, F1 is a battle of the brains, the ingenious ideas of the brightest minds forged in carbon fiber, pitted against those of their rivals. A skirmish of pens, drawing boards, and CAD machines. Think to victory, design or die. So you got here political dogfight. That's a metaphor. Gladiatorial contest. That's a metaphor. Nature of the beast. That's a metaphor. Battle of the brains. Got another metaphor there. And the brightest minds forged in carbon fiber. I love that one. And that's a metaphor as well. Maybe think to victory could be seen as a metaphor as well. Then we had the example from The Guardian, written by the comedian David Mitchell or something. And so one of his, I think his subheading was something like this: the trend for undetectable perfume and no makeup conceals a minefield of vanity and self-delusion. So there again we have another metaphor. And you'll find metaphors all over the place. So why do authors use metaphors? Well, because they're able to compress a lot of meaning into a few words. So what it does is it conjures up an image in your mind. So you think of some image and that helps to explain their point of view. Okay, so how do authors create metaphors? Authors value metaphors for their economy and compression. By this we mean that the author is able to transfer a large amount of meaning and qualities from one usually dissimilar item to the item they wish to describe. Now, underneath here I've got a few examples of metaphors, and I've given them names. I don't actually know if these are real names, but I've just given them names so that we can identify some of the characteristics. So I've called this example here thunderous applause. I've said that's an adjective metaphor. Why? Because it's the use of the adjective that creates the metaphor. So if it's just a great applause or a loud applause, then we know what that is. But if they say thunderous applause, then we automatically link that to the image of thunder, and we get all sorts of other images in our mind, and that, it's really powerful, and that probably makes us think about why it's so powerful. There must be some sort of great performance, or somebody must have made a great speech or something like that. So we understand that there's a lot of implications behind that, and that's the power of metaphors. So this one I've said noun metaphors with is or was. So this is sort of a typical metaphor. The man was a machine. And so when you see this sort of, or when you think about this sort of image, you might think of someone who is sort of maybe lacking in emotions, or someone who is really methodical in a way, or you might get someone who's a really great sportsman who, he never loses and he's always winning, and, is incredibly strong. So you get this image that he's almost not human, he's kind of like a machine. So we say he was a machine. Now remember, the point of metaphors is that it's a way of expressing something when the speaker, when the person says it, doesn't see any difference between the thing that he's comparing the subject to. So in this case, there's no difference to the speaker between the man and the machine. They are the same, basically. Okay, so prepositional metaphors using of, for example, a stroke of bad luck. Prepositional metaphors using by, haunted by visions. Prepositional metaphors using in, dwarfed in numbers. Sentence metaphors, so for example, still waters run deep. Verb metaphors, it should be this one, clouds sailed. And compound metaphors using nouns, so motor mouth. Okay, sorry about the mistake there. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just swap those over quickly. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so verb metaphors, cloud sailed. So there is the verb sailed, which turns it into a metaphor. So what you can do is you think about the thing that you're trying to describe and try to ascribe a unique verb to it, which describes the action. So now when we think about sailing, remember that metaphors cannot be literally true. They're only figuratively true. But the point of metaphors is they clarify an image. So that's the point. So when we think about cloud sailing, well, we know that only ships sail, but we can think about it in our minds and think about how the clouds might be traveling across the sky. And so it creates an image in that way. It describes the action of the clouds. And then compound metaphors using nouns, and you've got this sort of typical one here, motor mouth. Okay, so now what I've done is I've broken those different types of metaphors that we've spoken about here, and I've broken them up and talked about them in terms of their parts of speech. So we've got adjectives, prepositions, nouns, and verbs. So adjectives. Remember that you can pause this here, have a read through these words, and they'll come in really handy for you. So for example, adjectives: towering, bronze, white, fiery, impenetrable, shadowy, etc., etc. Prepositions: by, of, in. Nouns, so here I've actually included concrete and abstract nouns. So concrete, so snowflakes, carpet, for example. Darkness, abstract, belief, peace, brilliance, silence, beauty, etc., etc. Verbs: knotted, tangled, thundered, erupted, shimmered, sculpted, hidden, surrounded. So notice how descriptive these verbs are. They tell us something about how things happened. So instead of just saying, for example, he walked to the shops, for example, or just instead of saying he ran to the shops, then you might say he flew to the shops. So there we've created a metaphor straight away, and the image in our mind is that, well, he must have gone really, really fast. So obviously he was really keen to get something. So that's how you need to think about it, and thinking about how to create them will help you think about how authors use them as well. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to show you examples of metaphors that we've made using these same words here. So for example, adjective metaphors: towering arches, treacherous love, thorny atmosphere, jagged peace, razor-sharp brilliance, impenetrable faith, fragile silence, fragile beauty, forgotten memories, deafening silence, razor-sharp atmosphere. You see how descriptive these metaphors are, and these are all using all these words here. So I would suggest that you pause this and have a go at creating some of these metaphors yourself. Okay. Noun metaphors using is or was: his feet were ice, love is barbed wire, hate is darkness, anger is chaos, loyalty is gold, beauty is fragile, racism is hate, love is peace. Prepositional metaphors using of: a carpet of snowflakes, a mist of darkness, a valley of fire, a waterfall of fire, a stream of hate, the city of roaring hate, the village of prickly love. Okay, so not going to go through all of them. I'll read a few from the prepositional metaphors using by: shielded by love, devoured by hate, surrounded by love, surrounded by brilliance, healed by peace, destroyed by hate, sculpted by love, sculpted by brilliance, swallowed by greed, shielded by friendship, surrounded by hateful faces, overlooked by brilliance. Overlooked by ignorance, sentence metaphors. So for example, impenetrable love swallows hate, belief shields love, forgotten memories crowded his mind, factories crowded the village, snowflakes shimmered. Compound metaphors using nouns: granite belief, fire waterfalls, snowflake blanket, snowflake carpet, justice house, mist city, love memories. Prepositional metaphors using in: lost in greed, lost in pride, shuffled in panic, knotted in panic, tangled in love, tangled in hate, hidden in silence. So these are some examples of bad metaphors because it's very difficult for us to make any kind of sense with them. So even though the idea is very abstract, they have to make sense in some way. Okay, so for example, look at this: slippery fire. It's very difficult. I mean, they don't really go together. Scary applause. It's possible to imagine that, but it's kind of a bit weird. Erupted by strings, tangled by strings, thundered by hate, a city of hopelessness, death, graffiti feet. None of these create any sort of image, in my mind at least. They're very difficult to imagine. So that's what the mark scheme means by crafting of linguistic devices. So random professional examples. So these are some examples which I've pulled out just from magazines and newspapers and websites and all sorts of things. So, and all of a sudden he broke out in a great flame of anger. Okay, a great flame of anger. So this is from Jekyll and Hyde. The publication of The Hawk in the Rain was to launch a new poet into the public consciousness. So this is a book about poetry, and this is about Ted Hughes, and it's about his publication of Hawk in the Rain. And this is when he became famous, and they've described that by saying was to launch a new poet into the public consciousness. It's a very nice metaphor. This one, the emerging threat to IndyCar's giants. So I'm a motorsport fan, so IndyCar is a form of racing similar to Formula One in America. And they've described IndyCar's giants, and they've described the threat to IndyCar's giants. So the giants are just the big teams, for example. So look at this one. Getting a literature PhD will turn you into an emotional train wreck, not a professor. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's an article which I read, which I thought was quite interesting. Emotional train wreck. There you've got your metaphor again. Allow imaginations to lead, igniting the creative spark in writers. So that's another metaphor. Allow imaginations to lead. So they can't literally lead, but metaphorically we understand what it means. It means that we allow the imagination to be free and to create stuff. Igniting the creative spark in young writers. Again, igniting the creative spark is a metaphor as well. Okay, anyway, you can go through these and have a look at the examples. But the main thing is that you want to spend time trying to create metaphors yourself. You want to really try and use metaphors in your answer. Remember that metaphors you can use just by using verbs and adjectives, just by combining interesting verbs and nouns, and interesting nouns and adjectives. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. If you found it helpful, please make sure you subscribe, like, and comment in the comment section below. Thanks.